the Middle podcast, the podcast dedicated to the music, movies, and culture of Generation X.
What is up, slackers, and welcome to another episode of the Stuck in the Middle podcast. I am your host, Jason Eck, and this week has been a doozy. So get this. I think it was 2 weeks ago now, maybe 2.5 weeks ago. I'd gotten this flat tire, and my car is like 3 months old at this point, and go through all the garbage, get the tire replaced. Okay, great, fine. With a new vehicle, they didn't need to replace more than one because they always say you want to keep it balanced or whatever. So I go ahead, get it replaced, all good. So then yesterday was Eclipse Day. Everything was going to be terrifying. And the morning started with a crazy commute, like accidents everywhere. And we were like a half an hour behind schedule based upon this. So I ended up taking all back roads, getting my daughter to school late, which of course, rules about tardy, whatever. And, I get to work later than I'd like. So just kind of a frustrating, annoying morning, right? So then lunchtime comes. I'm going to go and get some lunch. And I'm taking my normal route to go to my routine lunch place, which is a garbage food. I'm not even going to mention what it is. And I see coming up the street, up in the distance, 3 cruisers, police cruisers, full bore, lights flashing, all that. And they go right into the intersection that I'm going to need to get through. And you're like, what is going on over there? I can't really tell. And, a big truck moves out of the way. So now I see there's like a vehicle that basically, I don't know how they did it, but there was some accident and, they were trying to get staged so they can start to go ahead and direct traffic, which is all that. But I turn around, I'm like, okay, I'll go around. It's going to be the long way, or I'll go somewhere else to get food. And I go up the side street that I go down all the time, and I hit this not even large necessarily pothole as far as width. It was just deep, and I hit this sucker full bore right in the brand new tire. I'm like, okay, it's fine. It's going to be fine. And I start to go, and all of a sudden the tire pressure light comes on. I'm like, are you serious? And then sure enough, I begin to hear the flip, 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 flip. Wonderful. Got a flat. Get it taken care of. Fine. So then I'm like, great. I got to replace this tire. I'm going to, So I bring it in today. They said, come right in early, 7 a.m. I'm there, good to go. And they even say, hey, it's a brand new tire. It's still under warranty. We're going to be able to replace this for you. Just going to be $25, the cost of balancing. Awesome. And it's going to be no more than an hour. Sweet. Yeah, I was there for like 2 hours. So that kind of just threw off my whole day. And yeah, just an annoyance, just sharing. Just like, are you kidding me? Brand new tire. But thankfully, I didn't have to replace it. But I do have to replace a pool liner. And the first couple of quotes that I got were rather pricey. And then another guy who I've spoken to in the past, he's like, I don't do like repair. I don't really do the open and close thing. I do builds and replacements. And he came in with a great quote. It's going to cost me gobs of money. So I'm trying to find the good in some challenging situations. And on top of it all, I'm going to be traveling quite a bit, which is not something I normally do. This whole past weekend was nothing but basketball games. So my son plays AAU basketball. It was 2 p.m. games on Saturday. Again, this is the vehicle that I'm driving around in, right? It was perfectly fine. It was lovely. A pothole at lunch is what did me in, but it was a 8 p.m. and a 9 p.m. game on a Saturday, followed by an 8 a.m. game on Sunday. And then if they won, they moved on. And the first round of the playoff was like an hour and 10 minutes away. And Yeah, that was a lot. It was a lot, but that wasn't until 5 p.m., right? So it's 8 p.m., 9 p.m., 8 a.m., go to mass, get a workout in, get some laundry done, then get back on the road, go down there. And I have to admit, we were kind of hoping they'd lose. But then they're playing so well. And we're like, oh my gosh, kind of hope they win. They ended up losing by 1, but this was their first tournament of the season, and they'd only had 2 practices because the high school gyms that they typically go to had their regular schedule, and then they had a couple of teams that made playoffs, and it took longer. So only 2 practices, and some of the kids they've played together before. But to go out there, win 4 games, no, three games. Yeah, they went 3-0, and then they lost that 4th game by 1. But in order to have completed the whole kit and caboodle and win that tournament, they would have had to have won 5 games. So also yesterday morning, before my daughter and I went, the kid was so worn out, our basketball player. This kid was like a zombie in the morning. But anyway, so that's just a little bit of what's going on. Still working on fitness. I'm in week 5. Haven't shown like a huge loss of weight necessarily, but I'm moving around so much better, and I'm starting to get my wind back. Because I was getting to that point where we have some construction happening at work, so we have to go through a different entrance, which is a little bit further and a little bit more stairs. And I would be like, all these kind of things are getting better, like just being able to move, because I am carrying like 30 pounds more. I'm 10 pounds down about, really more like 7. But yeah, it's going well. I'm still working on that content. I am definitely going to be posting it. It's a matter of editing it all down. Had some computer issues. I think I mentioned that last week, but stay tuned if you're interested in fitness. And I am working on one guest that I'm trying to get, which would be super cool. And really, it's a matter of someone who is able to accomplish things physically in middle age that most people start much younger. And I just think that's a really cool, relatable thing for all of us in our middle age, that he can still do amazing things. So anyway, that's a little recap for the week. So then what are we talking about tonight? Well, I have to tell you, I thought about maybe I would just wait until, 2025 when the official anniversary, but I don't know what it was that clicked this into my head, but I'm like, I think this is an interesting topic because music is such a big part of the show. And we're also in this kind of, well, this is really what spurred it on. We're in a environment now, both politically and sociologically, where kind of a concept that comes up repeatedly throughout history is ideas about censorship and what is appropriate, and where people are at different phases in life, I think somewhat dictates how they feel about certain forms of censorship. And it's also, I think, a difference between censorship and responsibility. And where is the responsibility? To give people informed information about what it is that they might be consuming. So I'm going back to 1985 and the PMRC, the Parents Music Resource Center. So I have a number of different articles that are looking at this from a lot of different perspectives, including people who are on the PMRC, but also some of the artists and musicians who were taking up the fight against censorship. So one of the key things here is to remember who it was based upon, right? Or who it was built upon. And that they're called the Washington Wives, right? So they're connections with government. And you have the founder of the PMRC, Tipper Gore, who is the wife of Senator and then future Vice President Al Gore, Democrat. And Susan Baker, who's the wife of Treasury Secretary James Baker, Republican. So the reason I'm making that point is that one of the artists that spoke at the senatorial committee that they had about music censorship, always likes to make sure that he makes it very, very clear that it was a bipartisan effort, because he has some lobbying that he does for certain causes, and he's very cautious about what he says. You also have Pam Hauer, who is wife of a Washington real estate magnate by the name of Raymond Hauer, and then Sally Nevius, who is wife of former Washington City Councilman John Nevius. And eventually they grew to like 22 people, all trying to go ahead and, in their minds, just give parents control by doing a couple of things. And I think most famously, it is the parental advisory stickers. So bear in mind, and I did not know this, it's so curious to me, because one of the people that helped to fund the PMRC is someone I wouldn't have expected, only because of kind of the time period in which they occupied musical space. And one of them is Mike Love of the Beach Boys, and Joseph Coors, the owner of Coors Beers. I had no idea, but some of the PMRC meetings were held at the Coors offices. That's so fascinating to me. But Mike Love, when you think about the Beach Boys and what they experienced, what they were part of, but also the fact that at different points in their careers, they were hit with kind of some ideas about maybe they shouldn't talk about certain things in their music. So before we start talking about the music of the 80s, one of the things that I think is so interesting is a couple of members of the PMRC said, well, you know, music isn't like Elvis and the Beatles anymore. And I found that kind of ticks something off in my brain. So first and foremost, Elvis Presley could not be filmed below the waist because of his form of dancing was considered sexual. His gyrations, as they were. That was considered to be taboo for television. So to say that Elvis is now this squeaky clean kind of image is very, very curious. Now, the Beatles, of course, went down a road of very strong drug use, of which they didn't shy away from, but their music wasn't typically overtly sexual. However, one of their main contemporaries is the Rolling Stones, who were often considered tawdry, if not explicit, if not inappropriate. And then to take it even further, because when we talk about some of the music that the PMRC specifically brought up, I just think to myself, did any of these people who, based upon their age, I would have to think, listen to like Led Zeppelin, for example? I mean, the Lemon song? The way you squeeze my lemon and the juice runs down my leg? I mean, come on. Gonna give you every inch of my love, whole lot of love. I mean, come on. That's pretty on the nose, is it not? So that's where some of the stuff that's on their list, that was on their hit list, if you will, is so weird to me. If for no other reason than you do have a history of things that would have been popular music in their youth that they find objectionable. Now, I will admit, as a parent, for the longest time, we were very, I don't want to say conservative necessarily, but choosy about what our kids were exposed to at different places in their development. I just think that's good parenting. I think that, there's nothing off limits as you're going through gradual phases of development. Now, admittedly, my youngest probably, so my kids are so close in age, but it's enough where like the oldest was ready to move on to more explicit things. And I say explicit, I mean more mature things. Let's put it that way. And little brother certainly was exposed to things that my oldest wasn't at the same age. And I think a lot of parents experience that. But if it's age appropriate, that's fine. And my daughter asked last year, I think, so when she turned 16, she was kind of like, Dad, can I please have some of the restrictions off as far as explicit music on Apple Music, for example, because you can block it and only clean versions are available. And, a little bit younger than, again, my oldest, who was a little bit older. I think he was probably 17, maybe even 18 before he had his unlocked. He also wasn't necessarily looking for it. So that's just a piece of it. But one of the things that a very important person in all of this was talking about their viewpoint on parenting and all of that. And that's where I don't necessarily hate the idea of just consenting to something as simple as a sticker. I do look at it as being relatively no different than TV and movie ratings, because music in itself doesn't have those same kind of ratings. There is no, mature or rated R or PG on music. And you could conceivably say that it was warranted. Instead, it's a very kind of black and white deal, literally like the sticker of whether you have it or you don't. So here's what's so curious. On my ride home this evening, I decided that I was going to listen to the music that was considered the Filthy 15. And these were the songs that they had compiled to show what was happening in popular music and bring this forward to congressional hearings. And the first song that's on the list is blatantly obvious, but I'm going to go to a anecdote first of how this all happened. And you just look at it and you go, well, that was bad decision making from a parental perspective, right? So here is a quote from the legendary Frank Zappa. And he says, during this time, this is from his book, there are several historical accounts from which to choose. Let's arbitrarily choose this one. One day in 1985, Tipper Gore, wife of Democrat senator from Tennessee, bought her 8-year-old daughter a copy of the soundtrack album The Prince's Purple Rain, an R-rated film which had already generated considerable controversy for its sexual content. For some reason, however, she was shocked when their daughter pointed out a reference to masturbation in a song called Darling Nikki. Tipper rounded up a bunch of her Washington housewife friends, most of whom happened to be married to influential members of the U.S. Senate, and founded the PMRC. Okay. That was my atrocious attempt at a Frank Zappa. I think it started off okay, and then it just kind of trailed off. But one of the things when you have any type of politician involved, I feel like there's a little bit of, or a lot of embellishment to stories, because I just have to say, your 8-year-old daughter should not be getting Prince's Purple Rain. I mean, it was an R-rated film, which had a considerable amount of sexual content in it. I mean, what are you doing? But I guess I could conceivably say, oh, well, I didn't know. I just thought it was a pop record. Look, it's Prince. Prince had already been around for a couple of years at that point. Are you unaware of who Prince is and why you think that's, this is the album to go? So what Frank Zappa is saying, it's not a matter of whether it shouldn't or shouldn't be available for purchase, but do parents really need to have a label on it to know the association between the album and the movie? So I don't know. It depends on, I guess, what you're exposed to. So I don't think that as necessarily a super strong argument to say that it shouldn't be there. Yeah. But here's another anecdote. This comes from Susan Baker, wife of Jim Baker, who says, what did it for me? It was like a virgin. My daughter said, Mama, what's a virgin? And I said, what do you mean? She said, well, Madonna sings this song like a virgin, touched for the very first time. What's a virgin? I was speechless. Here she was still playing with dolls at 7. Well, she should be playing with dolls at 7. And yes, Like a Virgin is a very sexual song and a huge hit. It then becomes a matter of, okay, what's appropriate, what's not? Should that be a song that's only played in prime time if you're going to use the TV model? Or should that have a rating? I don't know, but it's certainly fertile territory. I think I mentioned on last week's episode, I Want Your Sex by George Michael. I mean, that was a huge hit. The video was racy, and the content of the song itself is, I want your sex. I mean, it's, what do you do? But here is what they called the Filthy 15 that they brought forth. So number 1, Prince, Darling Nikki. The lyrical content was sex and masturbation. I know the song well. Number 2 was Sheena Easton and Sugar Walls, and this is an allusion to sex. Now, many songs have, how do I put this, metaphorical allusions to sex. Many songs, a lot of songs. But why in particular? I took a listen to it. I don't remember having ever heard it. I like Sheena Easton enough, mostly with her work with Prince, as we had mentioned. But Sugar Walls, I listened to it. I don't know. I think that you have to be really listening for it, or you just make the assumption that all songs are about sex, therefore this constitutes. Number 3 is Judas Priest, Eat Me Alive, which this is noted for sex and violence because it is a song about BDSM. So bondage, sadomasochism. And, you can get into, Rob Halford has a whole bunch of things about why he thinks, he wrote the song at the time. Certainly it was meant to be pushing buttons. He admits to that. He's like, we wrote about stuff that we found interesting, that they thought was fun. And if you look at the image of Judas Priest, there's a lot of leather, and it shouldn't come as that much of a surprise. Number 4 was Vanity with Strap On, Robbie Baby. I couldn't find the song to play, but this just says sex. They flagged it for sex. Number 5 is Motley Crue, and this one surprised me because when I was driving in the car and I asked Siri to play it, it bleeped out. I've never heard this before. I just updated my phone last night, and I think this is a new edition. It went, now playing Beep by Motley Crue. And I'm like, what? But this is Bastard for Violence and Language. Now, I believe the song was written about someone who was in the industry that they considered to be a bastard. And it was basically, we hate this guy. But is this any different from a song like Hair of the Dog? Now you're messing with the son of a bitch, for example, or whatever it is, song from another era. AC/DC, Let Me Put My Love Into You. Yeah, go ahead and see what I said before about Led Zeppelin and A Whole Lot of Love or Lemon Song. Yeah, okay. Twisted Sister, We're Not Gonna Take It. Violence. Is that what you get out of We're Not Gonna Take It, which I could look at as being just a simple protest song? Oh, you're so condescending. Did you look at the music video, which is slapstick as hell? It was meant to be comedic, and they've determined that it was violent. Madonna. No, not Like a Virgin, as Susan Baker talked about earlier. Dress You Up. Gonna dress you up in my love. By the way, one of my favorite Madonna songs, to be perfectly honest with you. It's a great song. Sex. Like every Madonna song is about sex. Wasp. Animal, Fuck Like a Beast. Now, we're going to come back to that song in just a minute. Sex, language, violence, and Blackie Lawless has a whole opinion about that song, which we'll get to in a couple minutes. Def Leppard. Listen to this. Def Leppard, High and Dry, Saturday Night. Drug and alcohol use. High and Dry is the song that you choose. just a couple years later, let me tell you, if you want a song that is oozing nothing but double entendres, what about Pour Some Sugar on Me? I mean, this is your choice that you make for Def Leppard. Just very weird. Mercyful Fate and Black Sabbath, 11 and 12. Into the Coven by Mercyful Fate and Trash by Black Sabbath. Now, Black Sabbath has long been given, going back to, the 60s, late 60s, early 70s, the occult thing. But this was about drug and alcohol use. And Mercyful Fate is a satanic-based band. Of course, that's King Diamond. And yeah, it's the occult. I can see why they flagged this on the list. But do you really think that other than underground metal fans, that Mercyful Fate was like something that was going to be hitting your Billboard top 10 at that time? Doubtful. Now you've just turned on a whole bunch of people to that music. Mary Jane Girls at number 13, In My House. I hadn't heard that song in a million years till I listened to it. I couldn't place it at first. And they're saying it's about sex because basically it's, come on over, we'll have a good time. Venom. I have heard about Venom, and I do call myself a metalhead. I'm more of a, the glam rock hair band, although Eddie Trunk is mad about the term hair band. I never really got into Venom, so I listened to this song, Possessed. It's a satanic thing. Also an interesting quote that I'll bring up a little bit later. And then finally, Cyndi Lauper. She-Bop. How is She-Bop on the list? Well, apparently that is a song, according to either the PMRC or, I don't know, it just says here, the song was considered controversial. I don't remember ever, I bop, you bop, they bop. Yeah. I didn't remember that being explicitly about masturbation. But apparently it is. She has stated that finding a copy of Gay Men's Magazine lying around the recording studio provided the impetus for writing She-Bop, and that she recorded the vocals while nude. Okay. If you say so. I mean, I guess it was about masturbation. Let's see. There's a video that references it, but not overtly. Among the images presented are an upright bottle shooting mayonnaise into the air, a sign at a gas station that displays "Get off here," gas pumps labeled "Good," "Better," "Nirvana," a large sign that reads "Self-Service," and a dance sequence where Lauper portrays a blind person with a cane and that same person winning a game of Master Bingo. Ah, Master Bingo! Both a reference to the myth. Because the blind person was playing Master Bingo, a reference to the myth that masturbation causes blindness. Well, I guess it is, but it is way less explicit than Darling Nikki, which is on the nose. So, after presenting their Filthy 15, they said, look, we're going to talk to the industry. And 19 record companies in August of 1985 agreed to put parental guidance, explicit lyrics, labels on the records. However, before they did that, the Senate agreed to hold a hearing of what they called, in quotes here, porn rock. Now, the hearing was held September 19th, 1985, with representatives from the PMRC on one side versus 3 musicians. And what a crazy list of people to put forth. Dee Snider of Twisted Sister, the legendary Frank Zappa, and of all people, John Denver. That's right, Rocky Mountain High, John Denver, are the representatives for artists, recording artists, at these hearings. So a couple of things that happened. Paula Hawkins, who was she was the second woman ever elected to the Senate from the American South. She was just a member of Senate that was asking questions, and she presented 3 record covers. Pyromania by Def Leppard, Wow by Wendy Williams, and Wasp by Wasp. And the music videos for Hot for Teacher by Van Halen and We're Not Gonna Take It by Twisted Sister. commenting, "Much has changed since Elvis' seemingly innocent times. Subtlety, suggestions, and innuendo have given way to over-expressions and descriptions of often violent sexual acts, drug-taking, and flirtations with the occult. The record album covers, to me, are self-explanatory." Now, Def Leppard's Pyromania has a picture of a skyscraper that is within what looks to be like a sniper scope and an explosion going out of the windows. Pyromania, it is someone has lit the building on fire. That in of itself could be considered a violent act. I never looked at that cover and even thought that way. Maybe that's more of a referendum on me being desensitized to such things, but I never considered that a controversial cover. Wow by Wendy O. Williams was just Wendy O. Williams being Wendy O. Williams. She is scantily clad. She's a punk rocker. She's from the Plasmatics, and she is dressed rather provocatively, as she often was. And then, of course, Wasp, which is a very, I'm going to use this in quotes again, demonic, right? It's the whole band, and they have like skeletons in the background, and it just looks very ominous, right? Self-titled debut. And this is what she put forth as saying this is a problem. Hot for Teacher, I'll admit, as a young man, that was a very titillating video. We're not going to take it, I don't know, where they think that is a problem. So Susan Baker said in her testimony, "There certainly are many cases for these ills in our society, but it is our contention that the pervasive messages aimed at children, which promote and glorify suicide, rape, sadomasochism, and so on, have to be numbered among the contributing factors." While Tipper Gore asked record companies to voluntarily place a warning label on music products inappropriate for younger children due to explicit sexual and violent lyrics. So again, it's one of those things where it probably shouldn't be in the hands of a 7-year-old or an 8-year-old at this point in time. But then where is the line? Where are you going into the realm of making it more difficult access for adults, for example? But as Frank Zappa put it, the PMRC proposal is an ill-conceived piece of nonsense which fails to deliver any real benefits to children, infringes the civil liberties of people who are not children, and promises to keep the courts busy for years dealing with the interpretational and enforcemental problems inherent in the proposal's design. So, I don't think it's that difficult to slap the label on. It's just a matter of whether you think it is, I guess, appropriate, and then who gets to decide? Who gets to decide which albums get the label? But I will tell you that ultimately it was determined that they were going to go ahead and get this done. So the RIAA, the Recording Industry Association of America, did agree to put parental advisory labels. Bear in mind, this did allow retailers, if they chose not to sell it, they didn't have to. They could say, hey, we want to have albums that can be available to everyone. So, for example, Walmart is well known for not carrying anything with a parental advisory warning. I don't know if that still exists. I'm assuming so. But many have said, including, of all people, Philip Bailey of Earth, Wind & Fire. I say of all people because I never looked at any music that they did as even being remotely controversial. Said that the sticker might sell more records. And Ice-T once said, "Hey, PMRC, you stupid fucking assholes, the sticker on the record is what makes them sell gold. Can't you see, you alcoholic idiots, the more you try to suppress us, the larger we get." Now, I will say that I do have a friend of mine who did once mention that he wasn't planning on buying a particular record, but because of some of this stuff, chose to. In fact, if I remember correctly, it was actually another Ice-T record. It was Ice-T's Body Count and Cop Killer, and he's like, well, they're protesting it. I'm getting that record. Of course, clearly emblazoned with the parental advisory sticker. So, as of 1985, this is where we were. So I want to check something here. Make sure I have this correct. The very first record, if I have this correct, it's a little bit of a, I guess you could call it a trivia question. What year was that? I had this all ready, and then for whatever reason, okay, yes, okay, here it is. So, the very first album to bear what we now know as the classic black and white parental advisory label. Now, there was an earlier version, but the one that we really got to know, the first one was in 1990 and banned in the USA by Two Live Crew. By May 1992, approximately 225 records had been marked with the warning. In response to later hearings, it was reworded as parental advisory explicit content, and then the system went unchanged until 2002, when record labels began including specific areas of concern, like we're used to with television and movies, strong language, violent content, or sexual content on CDs in particular, and that the parental advisory was then used in streaming services as of 2011. But here's what's so curious to me. So this was done in the U.S. going all the way back to the late 80s, early 90s. And I believe that this did not happen until quite a bit later in countries like the UK, which I just think is really curious. But it also shows that, well, I mean, there are definitely differences of even what's on TV in different countries as well as far as what's allowed. But yeah, so the parental advisory explicit label that we know, the black and white from when we were young, that ran from 96 to 2001. No, I'm sorry. So the parental advisory, the first one from the 90s, coexisted with the current label from 96 to 2001. So there was one that just said, warning, tone of this record, unsuitable for minors. That's an interesting one. And then there was an example of one that was just like kind of an X. It's very curious, but parental advisory, explicit content as opposed to explicit lyrics. So then I found this fascinating. So there was an article that was in Newsweek that was called An Oral History of the PMRC's War on Dirty Lyrics. So this was Newsweek. This was published in 2015. And they actually got a number of the people who were involved, and I think I mentioned at least one of them earlier, which was Susan Baker, Pam Hauer, who I mentioned, Frank Zappa, Sis Levin, who is the executive director of the PMRC, Candy Stroud, who was a journalist and a PMRC spokeswoman who debated Frank Zappa, and I can't imagine that is an easy task, Surfy Caldwell, a radio personality who testified, Kronos, the singer for the Filthy 15 targeted Venom, Dee Snider, Blackie Lawless from Wasp, and Joan McDuffie, who is the singer for the Mary Jane Girls, also part of the Filthy 15, and some of their recollections and how they felt about it. And I thought there were some pretty cool quotes here. So I've already mentioned that Zappa was talking about Purple Rain. But yeah, it always starts, it seems like, with Madonna. It starts with Madonna, and Pam Hauer said, I had a daughter, and anything delivered through music can be powerful. And I agree with that. Music is meant to evoke emotions and feelings and all that. And if it is more explicit, it's less about the realm of your interpretation of the music. It's basically kind of hitting you over the head with it, right? Sis Levin said, I did a doctorate in conflict resolution and nonviolence. So what I teach at the university level is that the fit is that the music is a form of violence in our children. just listen to what they're listening to get a handle on violence because they consider it to be a kind of a cause and effect. Again, not sure I agree with that because most of the time when things have gone to trial, for example, there was a murder-suicide situation, I believe, that happened, and they talked about Judas Priest, and they talked about Ozzy Osbourne in the song Suicide Solution, which is a anti-alcohol song and an anti-suicide song. Typically, those things don't pass as being strong enough influences to really bring about that kind of behavior. This Candy Stroud, the journalist, said, I remember one time one of my kids said, and honestly, we've probably done this ourselves, and I know that my daughter said something similar recently. I remember one time one of my kids said, listen to this song, but don't listen to the lyrics, Mom. You won't like them. Meaning, hey, the music is great, but just don't listen to the words. It'll be fine. And of course, it was Prince. But the same person said, wow, it really changed since the days of the Beatles and Elvis. Less so than you think. So the Filthy 15, I didn't even know this. They propose letters. So violent lyrics would be marked with a V, satanic or anti-Christian occult content with an O for occult, and lyrics referencing drugs or alcohol with a D/A for drugs, alcohol. Interesting. Very interesting. Susan Baker says, our goal in the beginning was just to alert people. Like, hey, we're going to start this. We want to get some labeling, some kind of ratings, just like the movies. Within the first 5 or 6 months, we talked to Stan Gordikov, the head of the IAA, and we working with him, and within a year, they agreed that they would do something. So then Kronos, Venom, said, I was told about the PMRC during a recording session, and I thought someone had a hidden camera like they're pulling a prank on me, so I dismissed it as bollocks. Then when I found out that this was real, I couldn't understand how supposedly intelligent people could be so ignorant. Of course rock and roll has all the subject matter they accused it of. It's rock and roll. It's supposed to be hardcore and edgy. But most of us rockers have families, and we are responsible parents. We don't need the PMRC doing our jobs of protecting our kids from the harmful shit in this world. I would have been more upset if one of my songs or albums had not taken pride of place on their list. And Dee Snider said, you could talk about the music that was on the Filthy 15. It's easy listening by today's standards. Well, I mean, Wasp was pretty explicit. Darlin' Nikki is pretty explicit. It's more than ironic that in the movie Rock of Ages, the Parents Music Resource Center-esque group headed by Catherine Zeta-Jones sang, we're not going to take it at the rock star. That's irony in its purest form. But Blackie Lawless said, it's true that they made us a household word. But they made us a household world. They made us a household world of people's grandmothers in the Midwest because the kids already knew who we were. The kids already had the records. Yeah, they make you this household word to somebody's grandma, but grandmas don't buy records. I think a lot of artists thought, okay, this exposure is going to help us sell more records. But I don't think in reality it did. I know it didn't for us. And Joan McDuffie from the Mary Jane Girls said, I thought it was weird. I was like, really? When they picked that song, I remember being really, really irritated because there was nothing in the song that would suggest anything inappropriate. Was the song about sex? Of course it was. But lyrically, it was done very tastefully. It wasn't something that would make your kids go, oh, I'm going to go figure out what she's talking about. And now I mentioned Blackie Lawless from Wasp. And again, this is where another quote by Blackie. And he says, but I'm coming from a whole different perspective because I don't know if you're aware or not, but I'm a born-again Christian. I've not played that song for almost 10 years, and that song would not be something I would want to be represented as. So this is what I mean. It's so interesting to think about how a guy who writes this song then at a later stage of his life was like, yeah, it's not for me. That's inappropriate. I shouldn't have done it. Very curious. And that's where I go back and forth because I certainly know when I was young, I was like, yeah, you shouldn't censor anything. But at the same time, I don't remember being like, No, like a label. I'm not going to go out of my way to get an album just because it has a label, but I kind of know what I'm getting in for if it does have one. Let's see. Larry Stein, who is Frank Zappa's attorney, said Zappa was asked to, and he definitely wanted it because he felt very strongly about the issue. And my 15 minutes of fame is that when that MTV clip plays, he walks into the Senate and says, "Hi, my name is Frank Zappa, and this is my lawyer, Larry Stein." The only picture of a client that I actually have in my office is a picture of Frank and me at the U.S. Senate. But then Gail Zappa, Frank Zappa's widow, said they were saying that they were going to have a hearing, and that pissed Frank off because it was a waste of resources and expenses to get involved in censorship of people's artwork apart from everything else. He was pissed. But again, Dee Snider went with the whole, now we know what records to buy. That was the battle cry of the teens. We know what record the cool records are. Now, Blackie Lawless obviously has a different viewpoint on that, and Dee Snider feels very strongly that there was a cause correlation kind of thing. Let's see. I don't really think there's much else other than so Slade Gordon, former senator from Washington, says, I have held Al Gore in utmost contempt ever since that day. He was on the committee and refused to defend his own wife. Wow. Wow. And then Susan Baker said some of Zappa's testimony was ludicrous, but John Denver was there too. We understand how people feel. It's free speech, but we say, yes, speech is free. But when you buy a product in the store, it has a label on it that tells you what the ingredients are. I don't think that's crazy. I know. Some of you might be like, I thought you were a metal and punk guy back in the day. I know, but as a parent, I'm just like, that's kind of reasonable. And then finally, Dee Snider says, I got to give John Denver credit. His testimony was one of the most scathing because they fully expected that he was such a mom, American Pie, John Denver, Christmas special, fresh scrub guy. Everyone expected that he'd be on the side of the right being censorship. When he brought up, like, I liken this to the Nazi book burnings, that's what he said in his testimony. You should have seen them start running for the hills. His testimony was the most powerful in many ways. Let's see. Yeah, I think that's about it from this article. I mean, they got a lot of really great and thoughtful responses from people and how they felt about it. But here's the last one I'm going to share with you. This is a really cool thing. Rolling Stone, also in 2015, because it was, 30 years, whatever. And, where are the Filthy 15? Where are they now? Right? So, of course, Judas Priest. Well, they're Judas Priest. What they said then, and I didn't know this, but we agree that certain guidelines are important. I don't really feel that we as a band have done anything that can be misconstrued as harmful or damaging, said Rob Halford. God forbid we should ever want to do that. That would end our career overnight. So after the PMRC, the group's album Turbo came out in 1986, featured a tune called Parental Guidance, which contained the lyrics, "Don't you remember what it's like to lose control? Put on my jacket before you get too old. We don't need no parental guidance." But what do they say now? I love Eat 'Em Alive, Halford tells Rolling Stone. We did that song in the Metal Masters tour in 2008, and it was a great song. For me, it was fun, S&M, rock, sex song. Let's see. But he's, I think, born again, too. I'm wondering if you have that same conversation with him now, how he feels about it. Motley Crue. What they said then. I'm not a parent. Bassist and bastard composer Nikki Sixx told Rolling Stone in 1987, I don't want to tell kids what to do. I've always thought of us as the psychiatrists of rock and roll because the kids come to see us, get all this anxiety and pent up aggression out. That hour and a half is theirs and no one can take it away. No parent can tell them to turn it down. What they say now. Once you put that sticker on, the parental warning sticker, the album takes off. Those kids want it even more. That was Vince. What did Prince say back then? He said, a lot of people have the idea that I'm a wild sexual person. To some degree I am, but not 24 hours a day. I mean, nobody can be what they are 24 hours a day, no matter what it is. Oh, I love Prince. What he says now. So back in 2004, he said, times were different back then, and he no longer performs Darling Nikki. I wouldn't stand out today if I was brand new and came like that. But see, back then, nobody else was doing that. And I knew that it would get me over. I didn't dress like anybody. I didn't look like anybody. And I didn't sound like anybody. And we still try to do that. So he is saying he was purposely provocative. Surprise, surprise. Sheena Easton said, rock and roll is just from the heart. If you feel sexy, raw, and raunchy, be you a male or female, doing anything particular, performance or song, then that's what you do. We are not embarrassed to be sexy when we want to be. What she says now. My feelings were then and remain now that every parent has the right to filter the content that their children are exposed to. If a parent felt that Sugar Walls was inappropriate for their kids to listen to, they are well within their rights to make that clear. Adults, on the other hand, are free to choose what they want. It did not offend me that some people didn't want their kids listening to Sugar Walls at all. I believe the track found its intended audience. That is such a thoughtful, great response, Sheena Easton. That's tremendous. Blackie Lawless said then, I think we created quite a bit of controversy here. I've been reading a lot in the newspapers and the magazines about me and the boys here. You know what they're saying about us? That we're sexual perverts. They say that WASP are a parent's worst nightmare. Have you ever heard the expression, this one's for you? Well, this is for Tipper Gore and all the rest of the fucking PMRC. What they say now? At the time, to have a female senator hold up a picture of my crotch in front of Congress made me ask myself, are you kidding me? I'm just some kid in a rock and roll band. Do these guys have nothing better to do with our tax money? But now, being a born-again Christian, I've not played that song for almost 10 years. Let's see. Who else? King Diamond. I know people like to be scared just a little bit, and they like that because they go watching all the horror movies, he said in 1987. People don't like our lyrics because it says Satan on it, but they go and watch Halloween, so why don't they just accept our lyrics? Just take it as horror stories. That's all. But what does he say? Fast forward 20 years. It seems funny because today, what people are writing about make those times seem so quaint. Even back then, we didn't think that we were writing about anything very extreme. I think we were on tour in 85 and we saw an article with us listed in USA Today. And we said, whoa, wow, someone is writing about us. We can't believe it. And then we barely set foot in the US and we were already big. So yes, he is saying here, thanks for the promotion, Tipper. So think about that. Avowed Satanist, right out there about it. And he says that they became a bigger band because they were given a national platform in the U.S., which is the largest, music buying consumer base in the world. Very interesting. Vanity. I put the sexual image of me in my music. My music is sexual, so you can say I'm just putting it all out there all the time. What she says now. I was young and irresponsible, a silly woman laden with sin, not caring for anything except fortune and fame and self. But I've lived seeking truth in Jesus Christ and has found me free and has made me free. Interesting. Def Leppard. Party songs are part of the entertainment, Joe Elliott said. The kids like us to do that. We like to do it as well, but we don't write about it all the time. That's right. They don't write about it all the time. What they say now. Dee Snider basically stood up for our rights as artists. He's an extremely intelligent and cool guy, and this obviously upset those people with closed minds who, in their ignorance, expected him to turn up in his stage attire, expecting him not to be able to tell the difference between entertainment and real life. His inclusion in this period of our history is momentous and really means a lot to a lot of artists. So, where's Twisted Sister? So, back then, we've covered what he said, what Dee said, all the stuff in the testimony, etc. I'm not imagining that much has changed about Dee Snider. Let's see. Everything I represented, stood for, and said back then, I have lived and stand by today. I stand by every word. As a parent, I monitored what my kids listened to. When my kids wanted to listen to Eminem, I listened to the album and talked about it with my kids and used it as a forum for discussion, and I practiced self-censorship. When my own family got into Tenacious D, the first album, including my little daughter, was only 8, and I made a special tape for her without Fuck Her Gently on it because she wasn't ready for Fuck Her Gently. But she clearly listened to Wonder Boy and the other songs her brothers were listening to. That's hands-on parenting and everything I stood for. I mean, just great. Love Dee. And he really, that was putting his, he has a great relationship, it seems, with his kids, and that's very sensible. He's like, okay, I'm going to make you an edit. I mean, that's really what he did. He burned her own CD or burned her or recorded her own tape without the songs that he felt, hey, you can't listen to that at 8 years old. It seems really reasonable to me. Let's see what Madonna said. I couldn't be a success without also being a sex symbol. I'm sexy. How can I avoid it? That's the essence of me. I would have to have a bag over my head and over my body, but then my voice would come across that it's sexy. Oh my gosh. Madonna. So what did she write in 2013? I like to provoke. It's in my DNA. But 9 times out of 10, there's a reason for it. Oh, my gosh. And she's still crazy. Cyndi Lauper said, I can just imagine her, this song was really scandalous for me. It was a scandal. It brought shame upon my family. I was accused of driving the fast lane. But anyway, the thing I thought of is, a bop a day keeps the doctor away. And that's absolutely true. I recommend it. What she says now, it's one thing to make that kind of music, she said in 2010. But in the context of what her then preteen son was listening to. But if they're going to play it on the radio, that's another story, isn't it? They're selling sex because sex sells. See, there's some modulation in these mindsets from when someone's in their 20s and when they're in middle age and with kids of their own. Let's see. What did Angus Young from AC/DC say? People who want to strangle other people's rights are possessed by one of the worst devils around, the Satan in their souls, which is called intolerance. Wow, he's going right for the jugular. Rock and roll is about one simple thing, freedom. When someone tries to murder that freedom, we're against it. What they say now. With the PMRC, you got idiots like Tipper Gore, who really is a twit. I guess he hasn't really changed his opinion much, huh? Let's see. Ian Gillan. No, wait. What does it say here? Oh, Tony Iommi once said, I think one of the most outrageous videos we've done was the one with Ian Gillan for Trashed. Of course it got banned because it was too lewd. What they say now. I have no personal feelings at all about such things, Gillan tells Rolling Stone. Professionally, I would say that someone needs their head examined. Trashed is about a wild night on a private racetrack. Filthy? I suppose if you have a really dirty mind. Because here's the lyric. I drank a bottle of tequila and I feel real good. I knew I wouldn't make it to the car, just wouldn't make it. Okay. The Mary Jane girls back then said we say things a lot of women are afraid to say, and in a lot of relationships, lack of communication breaks you apart. So we're trying to help the ladies. Honey, listen to the song. This is what I want to say to you. But then what they say now, I don't feel that In My House had any reason to be placed in the Filthy 15. At the time, I also felt that this was a feeble attempt at censorship to the music that was created by Rick James. Rick James, bitch! It never had anything to do with parental guidance. As most parents know, the quickest way to get your child interested in something is to try and keep it from them. Again, I'm ambivalent about that thought process, but last on the list is Venom, what they said then. I don't preach Satanism, occultism, witchcraft, or anything, Cronus said to Kerrang! Magazine in 1985. Rock and roll is basically entertainment, and that's as far as it goes. What They Say Now. It was by no means the most controversial song I wrote, but what the hell? I got a good laugh when I originally read it and was included in the Filthy 15. Now, I still think they were a bunch of losers. Everyone I spoke to always just figured they were bored people with nothing better to do. Also, you know what they say about calling the frying pan black, yeah? I bet these people were up to all sorts of debauchery behind the scenes. That is my favorite quote from all of this. Yes, we're talking about Washington insiders, and I can only imagine the sorts of debauchery that are happening there. That's a great quote by Kronos from Venom. Now I'm going to go and listen to Venom because that's just so good. So anyway, the PMRC, Tipper Gore, Susan Baker versus a who's who of interesting rock stars and legends. And the question I have for all of you, did it ever make you buy a record? Did it ever make you say, oh, got to go have that one because it's got the sticker. I bet it's the good stuff. I really never, at least I don't recall ever really thinking that way. I do remember the hearings happening. I remember being completely taken aback by seeing Dee Snider wearing his best denim as opposed to all the garish makeup. Like, wow, he's an actual person. And the fact that the three of them who spoke, Zappa and Dee Snider and John Denver, were all so articulate and so passionate, and they were more than equal to the task of speaking before this Senate hearing. And I think that changed at least some people's viewpoints of the idea of just the I don't know, low IQ, just rock and roll, kind of like vapid, empty-headed musician kind of thing. And instead they spoke in an impassioned and clearly educated way. Now, as I am in middle age, I don't know. I don't think it's that big of a deal to have a rating or a label, but I do think there needs to be, I guess, input from an artist as far as, intention, I guess. I don't know. But what do you think? Do you think that having warning labels, good thing, bad thing, indifferent? Do you, as a parent, find yourself curating things, not allowing certain things at different points in life? I'm just curious. Let me know. Hopefully you've enjoyed this little dive into the PMRC and kind of this legendary fight over free speech, and how free speech continues to be something that is an important topic. And I don't think that's ever going to change, because it is something that is, as far as being codified, it's a constitutional right in our country, and it's not in all countries something that is just granted under the law. There are limits in other places that we don't really have. And how far are you willing to go to be, as some will say, free speech absolutist, as Elon Musk claims to be? I don't know. Let me know. And you can do that by emailing me at stuckinthemiddlepod@yahoo.com. You can find me on Instagram, X, and YouTube at StuckPodX. Head on over to the Facebook page, Stuck in the Middle, a Gen X podcast. Please like, comment, share, leave 5-star reviews, and most importantly, please subscribe to the podcast. So until next time, later, slackers.